This is the Sustainable Goat Podcast.
We look to nature for how we should interrelate to the world. All the answers are within nature if we take the time to listen.
But what we have to find is a reasonable way how to handle plastic.
You know, consumers expect more. They're expecting brands to be more sustainable. They're choosing sustainable brands.
These are the stories and ideas from those that will define a generation. I'm your host, Steve Cassinem, and this is our planet in focus.
When I was a schoolboy, we learned at school that that was new, that was late 80s, that we should bring back the cans of Coke, etc., you know, because aluminium can be recycled. So that was like, when it comes to, when you ask me, what is it growing up here? So that was like my very first moment where I learned, okay, we didn't talk about sustainability. I think this term wasn't invented back then, wasn't used back then. That's like really 30 years ago. So it's you didn't say it's sustainable. You said just it's good for the environment. You know, we have to save resources. And as a school kid, we also, I think, once or every month, we went to collect paper outside the houses in the village where I grew up.
Really?
Yeah, so that was like a school kids afternoon. And so we did this for the community, collect the paper, but it took a while until I understood why, because it was going to be recycled, you know, in the end. So
yeah. That's so interesting. So it was kind of like a community thing it was like something that every year or just every kid does?
Yes, back then. But now, as of today, now I live in Basel, which is one of Switzerland's bigger cities. So this is professionalized by the city. So, of course, back then, recycling meant that we, as school kids, had like instead of school, we had an afternoon outside and collected the papers, the newspapers, etc.
That's so cool. That's such an interesting story of just like childhood being surrounded by it.
Yes. To save the forest. So that was the message we got in.
Exactly. I love it. Okay. So when you were young, what were you kind of most interested in kind of doing in life? What kind of lit you up and got you excited about the world around you?
I think that was music. Yes. Music, that got me excited the most, and languages, and soon when I was growing older, was traveling too. Yeah. And when I started traveling at the age of 20, I soon went to Thailand for the first time, and I discovered the fascination of the underwater world.
Yeah. So when was kind of your first experience with was that your first experience with like ocean and kind of having that true appreciation of it, or did it change your mindset? What was kind of...
Yeah, the first experience with ocean was probably when I was 5 or 6 years old, when we went for the first time for holidays to the Mediterranean Sea. So Italy, France. But the first time diving, I will never forget this. This was like an LSD trip. It was really. It was an enormous. It was this feeling of floating under the surface and this complete new world that opened up. You know, with those distinctive colors, those distinctive animals I hadn't seen before. That was an enormous experience for me.
Wow!
I was flashed. That's why I made this comparison. Yeah.
So you were kind of pursuing music, kind of just other things in life, and did this change the trajectory of it? Like actually going to Thailand and that whole experience that you did have, did that kind of start to change things for you?
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to how precious the ocean and its inhabitants are, yes, that changed a lot because I wasn't aware of that. You know, Switzerland is a landlocked country. We have a lot of mountains. We have a big, I think, connection to nature, but above sea level. So that was the important experience where I made in Thailand. And then from there, I went to see other places in the Caribbean, Seychelles, and other fascinating places. as a diver, and yeah.
Wow. What brought along this trip to go, I mean, kind of all over the world? Was it just you were done with school and wanted to take a little bit of time to travel, or, was there something kind of pulling you in a certain direction?
I think I just was very curious to see other places in the world, and I quit my studies at the university when I was, I think, 23 or 24. I had started working as a journalist, so I was curious and became a journalist to have more answers to questions that that I wanted to have answered. And from there, I saved some money, and then I wanted to explore the world. I was a classic backpacker, I would say.
Oh, that's amazing. Okay, so you kind of started your career as a journalist.
Yes. I was a journalist for 20 years.
Wow. Okay, so what was kind of your focus on journalism? What did you kind of want to focus on when you first started?
Yeah, when I first started, I was a classic reporter. So I really wrote stories about everything. I was the guy who was sent out to a report about, I don't know, the city's canalization or whatever. So explore new places and new scenes. And then I also sometimes I wrote some stories about my journeys, of course. So as a travel journalist, but my main focus was music, was culture. That was what I knew most about.
So what is it about music culture that kind of spills over into society, if you will? Like I always found that music, so for me, I'm not musically inclined really at all. I can recognize music. I use it in filmmaking, but hand me an instrument, I don't really know what I'm doing. And kind of very, very poor at keeping rhythm. But I know how much of a part music holds in society and like how communities come together and everything. What did you kind of experience when you were traveling the world? Because I'd imagine music, obviously, wherever you go is different. Did you kind of see how that affected culture?
Yeah, I mean, it's a cliche, let's be honest. It's a cliche that music connects people and builds bridges, but I think it's a true cliche, it's a fact. Well, it's not that I did a musical journey, so explored other rhythms or music styles when I was traveling. I really wanted to get to know the people and their whole culture, not just about music, so their lifestyles. But music for me was always a very emotional thing. It just touches me very much. I'm an emotional guy. I'm touched very fast when I see a movie, when I listen to a song, or when I see something that is not just, like for instance what we all do as a global community to planet Earth. So that's probably where it comes together.
Yeah, I mean, I would think, I think as more of a creative person, I think you have a little bit more of that kind of emotional connection. Did you kind of feel that when you were diving in Thailand? So I'd imagine fast forward a little bit, like just in that journey, you probably had, I don't know, my guess is some sort of connection in that moment that was just like such an emotional reaction of being underwater that it probably like changed you a little bit.
Exactly. It's like you say, it really changed my view. Also, my view about this world. It's not a flat Earth, definitely not. So, and there's a lot to discover underneath the surface.
Yeah. So, what's the fascination with? I mean, because you can explore the Earth an entire lifetime and still not find everything.
Yeah.
What is it about the ocean that fascinates you specifically?
As I mentioned, the colors, the species, it feels like an eternal place. I think other people are dreaming of becoming an astronaut. That was never something that fascinated me, to be honest. I also would never, I think, jump out of a plane, and do something crazy in a balloon. The sea, the ocean, there's something very calm when you dive. Also swimming, I love swimming. I feel light, not only light regarding my body weight, my body feeling, but also light when it comes to sorrows or whatever concerns you. It does good to me, and I think that the ocean always was something that was untouched somehow, you know, it was pure. It was pure. And that's maybe a bit why I changed my professional life now, because it really concerns me what we are doing to the oceans, but not only the oceans, the environment in total. Yeah.
Yeah. So how did you find Tide? Like, this is you're making a career decision. You're switching kind of what your path is to go after something that, you really believe in and you have a lot of heart behind.
Mm.
But how did you find Tide, and what was kind of that process looking like? Was it kind of easy to find your fit kind of in the arena, or did it take a little bit to find it?
Well, somehow it was how do you say it? It was a fate, destiny. It was destiny, because I was not happy anymore being a journalist. Here, all the medias have changed. The working situations have become worse working as a journalist, so the structures have changed. So it was, for me, being a journalist for 20 years, I felt tired within this business environment. And I also felt burnt out. So I was looking, how do you get out of a midlife crisis or whatever you call it, and you look for a new inspiration. And that's when I met or talked with Thomas Shorey about our goals for the rest of our lives. I was mid 40s, so here in Europe you still have to work for another 20-25 years, so you have to find a new mission, to make yourself happy and be happy. And Thomas, he already told me about Tide and his vision with Tide a couple of months before we finally met and sit together. And he told me, hey, listen, I need a second guy, who's willing to push this whole project. Tide was his idea, but it was a sidecar, Thomas is running a family business. He's manufacturing watch straps for many well-known brands. So they are part of the Swiss watch industry. And he came up with Tide after he saw one of those devastating documentaries, about plastic pollution. He came to me. We knew each other for a long time already, and he told me, hey, I think you would be like you could be the co-founder, and I have another business to run, and I need someone who shares the vision and helps me to put Tide on the feet.
Wow, that's incredible. So it really was kind of serendipitous. You're looking for a shift, care about the ocean, and then here this opportunity just comes.
Yes.
What did it feel like kind of going into really starting a business? I mean, had you done that before, kind of in the past? Like, had you started any side businesses and stuff, or was this all kind of a new world of exploring?
Yeah, I have started side businesses. I have written books, for instance. I have moderated a TV show. So I was used to do side businesses, but the difference here is we're talking about a global a company which is globally active. So we started from scratch because it was, and I really think it still is a bit quite an innovative idea to start a circular business that spans a net all around the world when it comes to sourcing and upcycling ocean-bound plastic. So for me, it was like a diving into new water when it comes to for instance, what is plastic? What is it about plastics processing? But my job is and was communication, because communication is everything. I think in life and in business, as you know, that's what we do now. And so we have, and that is our luck, we have made some studies together with the Swiss university, and there, are the experts when it comes to plastics processing and recycling. So we had this knowledge already at the university, and what we needed to build was an internal team and connect the dots also to places like Thailand or the Philippines, where we are sourcing the material. But of course, it wasn't an easy ride.
No, never. It's never easy. Yeah, that's the interesting part because I would love if you have any info kind of around, how the plastic industry works. I mean, I think we buy products at the market, we order things online, and it shows up, and that's the material, and we hope it lasts a really long time, but we don't necessarily know the process of how it's actually made. Like, what is plastic? How prolific is plastic? Is it in everything we have? I mean, what is, from kind of your perspective, how does that industry work in terms of plastic processing? Like, where does it all come from?
For me, it was astounding to learn that plastic is everywhere. I wasn't aware of that. As a private person, not connected to this business or industry, you're not aware that plastic is everywhere. It's in every part you touch, almost, Many people forget, for instance, that polyester, that their shoes or their jackets are also made of plastic, And also, I think many people are not aware that plastic was a fossil resource once, like oil or gas. So for me, this was also new terrain. I have learned a lot, and I have come to the conclusion that I think I'm not an opponent to plastic. I think plastic is everywhere. It does also good, not only harm. But what we have to find is like a reasonable way how to handle plastic. And the most reasonable way is to keep it within the circle, because once the damage is done, it's done. So our mission or our vision is, okay, there's a lot of plastic waste. We can't change that within the next 6 months, but we can change the habit. What do we do with the waste? Are we doing danger and harm to the environment, or are we trying to use this waste and bring it back into the circle?
Yeah. So, I mean, what's the process of plastic in its lifespan, specifically after use? What generally happens? Because, I mean, if you think about it as a consumer, at least in the States, you have, numbers on everything, and you put in the recycling bin, and then honestly, you just kind of hope that they're actually sorting it and doing the things correctly.
Yes.
How does that work in kind of the bigger plastic industry on the kind of the supplier waste side? What's the lifespan of it after it's used by the consumer?
Yeah, I mean, I think I can only talk now from my personal experience here in Europe. I think the most common plastic that is being recycled is the PET bottle. But this bottle you use for, let's say, maybe 10 minutes. You drink something, you buy a bottle, you drink your lemonade, and then you throw it away. Now, I think, as you mentioned, in more and more countries, we have a recycling system for these kind of bottles. But for many plastics, and I'm talking here also about Switzerland, which always claimed that they are at the forefront of recycling and protection of the environment. Switzerland, for instance, for a long time, you didn't do anything regarding recycling with the other kind of plastics. The other types of plastic, you just threw in the rubbish, and then it was burnt, and in winter we can heat our apartments. So that is a very short lifespan in my eyes. Then if we now think about tropical countries, they don't even need to, they have warm houses and warm apartments. So they don't need to burn the plastic for heating systems. What I have seen in Southeast Asia has shocked me. I have seen women burning plastic bags, and they were using it for a frying pan, So they
oh my gosh,
the meal for their family by burning plastic trash. So I mean, just imagine how poisonous this must be. So what I have seen there is that there's, in many places, there are no existing waste management systems. So the modern world created plastic which can be very useful for packaging. It also extends the lifespan of food, for instance. I really see, the advantages. But I think what we haven't, or what the industry hasn't delivered to us is a manual, what to do with this material after we use it for the original purpose. And I also think that the plastic industry probably is not interested, in recycling. I mean, why should they? They can sell plastic and plastic and plastic. Why should they be interested in keeping it in the circle, for instance? Yeah.
And so when you guys look to solve the problem, I mean, I would imagine one of the problems that you're trying to solve is as a business owner who's buying any type of plastic material in their manufacturing, you're going to want to know the quality of that plastic. Was that part of kind of what you guys are trying to solve? Is, okay, if we're going to close the loop and we're going to make this circular, we have to make this high quality too. What was that process like in kind of solving that problem?
Yes, I think now here comes another part of the destiny. We were very lucky that we were connected to the Swiss watch industry, because as you know, another true cliche, Swiss watches are very precise.
Are they the best watches? That's my question.
They for sure have some of the best watches, yes. But there are also other watch industries that I look up to, It's not a patriot thing, no.
Yeah.
But they are very precise and the standards are very high. We had these connections to the watch industry, not only the Swiss watch industry, also the American watch industry. For instance, Nixon watches, the Surf brand, belonged to one of our first clients to develop a watch made of Tide Ocean material. So they asked us to develop strap material, which is polyester, like nylon, but also cases for the watches. So from the very beginning, we had to meet these high standards. And that was also good for us because we wanted to find a solution to meet those high standards, because we knew, the bottle-to-bottle principle is well known already. So everyone knows we can recycle a PET bottle. And we wanted to prove that it actually should be possible to upcycle the material. We call it upcycling because a drinking bottle is being used for 10 minutes, but a watch, for instance, you wear hopefully for several years. So we keep this plastic waste much longer in the circle before the end of the next lifespan.
Yeah. So is the secret with plastic about making products with plastic that are intended to last a long time versus the immediacy of it? Because, I mean, you mentioned plastic is a good material and it's not going anywhere, but the way we use it kind of needs to change. Is there kind of like a threshold that you think, we should be making things out of plastic versus alternative materials?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. Is everything made of plastic really, is it necessary that this was made of plastic? That's your question, right?
Yeah, like, is it made of plastic? And then if it's something that's made to last, 40, 50 years, is there a point where it's actually better to use plastic? Because if you were to use another material, it would break down, and then you need to actually create that product again in a shorter period of time. What's that line? Yeah,
for sure. I mean, I think it really depends from product to product, Just to give you an example, I have read so many studies now also about how what's the ecological advantage of biodegradable materials, and there's always also a downside if you use materials that were originally intended to be food, for instance. So for me, it's very complex. A professor must answer this specific question who has read all the different studies. But I think, me personally, I think much more about my use of plastic, for instance. We have a policy within our company that we try to avoid plastic packaging when it comes to our lunch breaks, So if we go to the local shop and buy some fresh food from the corner shop, the Indian corner shop, or Pakistani corner shop, or the Thai corner shop, we bring along our own, how do you say, food tray. These are the small changes in our personal habits and use that I think are important. And then on the big scale, I mean, yeah, it's such a huge topic. I don't know where to start with. I mean, plastic can be a fantastic resource and it can really last for decades, which is great. But it's really bad when it ends up in the ocean because it lasts for decades. You see?
So let's dive in a little bit to actually what Tide does. So for the people that don't know, what does Tide do essentially?
Tide essentially has developed a mechanical method how to recycle and upcycle ocean-bound plastic waste. We are collecting ocean-bound plastic. We started originally in the Caribbean, didn't work out. Then continued in Southeast Asia, where we are collecting and collaborating with social enterprises in Thailand, in the Philippines, in Indonesia. And we are also opening up now a subsidiary in Mexico, because our goal is to be present on every single continent, to collect ocean-bound plastic that is threatening the oceans, the environment. And we also want to upcycle it on site. That is our idea, to upcycle it on site so that it becomes a new raw material. And this new raw material is as good as virgin plastic, but it has a much less impact when it comes to CO2, for instance, because it's a recycled material.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And so when you guys are actually looking at, sourcing all of this material, so I think for a lot of people, when you say like ocean bound plastic versus ocean plastic, I think whenever you hear ocean and plastic usually right next to each other, most people think you're, taking nets and removing plastic out of the ocean and then processing that and turning it into something else. You guys do ocean bound plastic. How does that supply chain work? I mean, is it through companies that would normally landfill it? Is it companies that already have their waste cycle and you take it off their hands? What does that process look like? So that way, I mean, people can understand, the difference honestly between ocean bound plastic and actual ocean plastic.
Yes, this distinction is very important to us because the term ocean plastic, I think, is a bit vague. There has also been some greenwashing in the past, I think, when it comes to what is ocean plastic. For us, this distinction was very important from the very beginning, because I think no one is, catching all of their plastic out of the deep blue sea. It's also questionable if this effort would be sustainable, for instance. I don't know. But we are focusing on ocean-bound plastic. This means we are making sure that we are collecting plastic that would eventually end up in the ocean. Usually, ocean-bound plastic is defined being plastic that can be found within a distance of, I think, 50 kilometers away from the coastline. Now, we have narrowed this down. We have narrowed this down to 15 kilometers. We are, for instance, just to give you an example, we have fishermen who are collecting plastic on remote islands in the Andaman Sea. I have just come back from 2 islands. One is Koh Chang in Thailand. In the Andaman Sea, Koh Chang has no electricity. Koh Chang has a lot of tourists in the high season that are coming from the mainland. You drive by boat, I think, around between 1 and 2 hours to end up on this beautiful. It's like The Beach, the movie. It's a paradise island, but they don't have a waste management system. So in the past, so far, all the plastic ended up in the ocean. As soon as monsoon season starts, so the rainy season starts, and they have like a rainy season for half a year, this washes all the litter into the sea. That happens all along this coastline, also along the mainland. So that's why we are focusing on ocean-bound plastic. Plastic the fisherman brings on his long-tail boat to our social enterprise was either already in the ocean and washed ashore, or it would have ended up in the ocean.
That's so interesting there's kind of a radius, if you will, to make it, quote unquote, ocean bound plastic kind of in that context. Is it more about the waste management system or the abundance of the material itself? Because it sounds like, it's more, how do we handle it? I mean, I think the perception of when you see, trash floating in oceans, you assume that it was floating from somewhere, another continent, a long way, and it traveled all the way there, not that, maybe it was monsoon season and that the trash that was already there just got pushed into the ocean. What do you think it is? Is it more about the waste management system or the actual material itself, or a bit of both?
It's a very good question. I think it's both. Yes, I think it's both. I think people, as I said before, people didn't get a manual how to treat plastic. So what do we do with plastic? Can we throw it away just like we can throw away the rest of the fruit we have eaten? No, it's we shouldn't do that. But did we provide a waste management system for plastic? No. So people got something new, but they didn't get the solution what to do at the end of the life cycle. And when we talk about Koh Chang, this island, they have a lot of plastic bottles that come from India. So in the monsoon season, a lot of plastic they are collecting is not even from Thailand, it's from India. So from a country that is hundreds of miles away, I was in Mexico a couple of months ago, and the plastic they were collecting along the Yucatan, so along the Caribbean, they collect the plastic that originated from 15 different countries. They could see this on the labels. Where does it come from originally? So it's really incredible. It's incredible how far a piece of plastic can travel and float once it's in the ocean.
Yeah.
We need to, in those islands, for instance, we need to establish waste management systems. We have a warehouse. We have a watch brand, Maurice Lacroix. They have sponsored the warehouse. So we are extremely grateful that some companies not only buy our material, but also, make a special donation to help us establish more infrastructure, because infrastructure is desperately needed and education is desperately needed. So what should we do? But nothing goes without the other. We can't explain how we should collect plastic and where we should put the collected plastic if we don't have the infrastructure to process the plastic. I mean, a lot of the global issue about plastic pollution has also been exported, by the way, exported by so-called, industrial countries, They sold the trash to developing countries who are always in need of money, of course, not always have, the solution to process the trash they are being paid for. So a lot of Asian countries now stopped to import trash because everything landed on uncontrolled landfills. And the most of the trash, not only plastic, ends up in many countries, ends up on uncontrolled landfills. And no one feels responsible for it. No politician, wants to touch this usually. This topic, everyone tries to forget about it, but the reminder comes back when it's, in the end, a couple of months later, it's being washed into the sea. Then you have the polluted beaches and the tourists who see this, and suddenly they realize, hey, we have an issue here. But who's in charge to solve it,
How difficult is it to process plastic into another raw material or take a bottle to another bottle? I mean, from I guess more the question is from an infrastructure standpoint, what does that look like? Like if you're going to set up a waste management system, is it 2,000-meter building with, a bunch of equipment, or can you theoretically do it in a small space?
You can theoretically do it in a small space. I mean, it all starts with the collection of plastic and then with the sorting. That is very crucial. You just can't mix a PET bottle with a polypropylene canister, for instance. There are different types of plastics and they have to be pure. This is crucial. So we have to teach the people, we have to give them the right instructions. As you mentioned, there are the numbers in the US, for instance, for the different types of plastic. There are also infrared systems that are making sure that, for instance, there's no metal in it. So everything has to be as pure as possible. But then I think you're really able to do anything. It's that the sky is the limit. When it's sorted, when it's washed, when it's processed, we are collaborating with recycling companies that have rather huge facilities. But when we started with the university's lab. So in this lab, they have a rather small machine. They are not processing 100 tons a day, And the first load that was collected in Haiti was shipped to Switzerland because that's where we did the studies. This kind of plastic was absolutely, we couldn't use it.
Wow.
Yeah. It was waste we couldn't process because it was shredded into flakes. It stank extremely, was not sorted, not at all. So it was really rubbish, and that was a tragedy. And we thought, okay, maybe it's not possible. Maybe it was just a dream. But then we found, and we were looking for other partners. We focused on Southeast Asia because that's also where, the issue is the biggest worldwide, So we thought, okay, we have to focus where we find the biggest problem. And there we have to offer a technological solution and find the right partners who are willing to establish a system by giving waste a value. Yeah, maybe we talk about the value later because I think that's something that is extremely important to success.
Oh, totally. No, let's dive into it. Yeah. So value of it. Yeah, let's dive in. What's it all about?
Yeah, well, for us, this means, bringing plastic waste back into the circle. It's a big effort and someone has to pay for it. So our concept is we have to create added value. It might be regarded as trash, but actually it's a valuable raw material. And this starts by paying a fisherman a fair price above the market price for plastic waste, because it's not his fault that there's plastic polluting the ocean.
So real quickly, his job is not to fish for fish. His job is to fish for plastic. He is a plastic fisherman.
Well, I don't want him to give up his old job as a fisherman,
Right. But he ends up having to do pretty much plastic collection before he can fish.
We give him a motivation to look out for plastic.
Mm-hmm.
Like the same motivation he has to catch some fish. We are also like a marketplace, like where he brings the fish, he brings the plastic. Yeah.
Oh, I love that.
The thing is, he is also very happy to have this, let's say, second leg in a professional way. Why? Because as we all know, there's a big fishing industry with huge vessels, They are a big threat for the small fishermen and fisherwomen, because they are fishing empty the ponds ashore and they are really struggling, to find enough fish. Then when we talk about a beautiful tropical country like Thailand, Corona hit this country very hard. So Thailand depends on tourism, like many of those beautiful tropical countries, all those paradises. But the tourism didn't happen during the pandemic. So the fisherman didn't have the possibility to sell as much fish as he was used to, because when there are no tourists, the market gets much smaller, for fresh fish, for instance. So when we came and offered to pay a very decent price, they all were happy, and they because it helped them to survive. On this island in Koh Chang, I met a lady. She runs a guest house, beautiful guest house. She has bungalows on the sea. It's like a dream. But they have more than 6 months per year. They have a monsoon season, rainy season. And then the tourists are not interested to explore the island, It's just bad weather. So she has no income for 6 months. And that is quite heavy. And she was really in tears when we told her that she can now work for us these other 6 months and collect plastic on the island, bring it to us, and we pay her and we give her the money for her work,
Wow. That's amazing. I mean, how does that feel to be kind of having that impact? I mean, you're literally not only helping on the plastic side, but you have this other benefit of like truly helping a community too.
Yes. I mean, it's not that I feel, how do I feel? It's not that I feel godlike, not at all. We are privileged and we have to share this privilege. And if we want to make the world more sustainable, sustainability also means that everyone benefits from a good idea, I think, There I'm maybe a bit of almost a naive thinking person. I really think that everyone should have the best possible life. And if we want to give value to waste, I think we have to give value to work too, We have to appreciate what everyone within a supply chain does. We can't earn money on the shoulders of other countries' people, That's just not what a fair trade market and a fair world can be based on. And that's something we really believe in. That's really something we believe in. That's really important to us,
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say is, that's something that's in your DNA as a company.
Yeah.
And so as a corporation, for example, that decides to use Tide ocean plastic, you can actually, have that impact as a business and a consumer, because you're investing in the raw material in the supply chain that's going to have the greatest benefit for the entire community. Like there's nobody that's getting taken advantage of along the way, at least in your step of the process.
Yes, that's when we now talk about business and not just philosophy. Then that's the conclusion. You're absolutely right, because in the end, we can only survive as a business when someone is willing to pay a bit more for ocean-bound plastic. And this brand or company has to understand why is our price higher and not the same as virgin plastic, because we give this waste a value, and this value is not only protecting the environment, it's not only cleaning the beaches, it's also paying fishermen, paying someone in a social enterprise who is sorting plastic, who is washing plastic, a very fair price above market, to give them the same appreciation, about their work to keep the oceans clean. And in the end, the brand who sees this add-on or who sees this advantage is of course also using this story for their marketing, and that's where they get the added value. I think we want to be like the world's #1 label when it comes to the use of good plastic.
Yeah. I think that's an interesting way of looking at it, though, is good plastic. And so when it comes down to now that step of the process, how does that work for Tide? Is it, because I would imagine one of the questions that you get is, is this still the same quality as virgin plastic? Like it has to, if it doesn't meet the product standard of the company, they're kind of putting their brand in jeopardy by risking it for good quote unquote good plastic if they don't know if it's good or not. So what is it like in terms of the quality when you guys process it?
Yes, I mean, we have a chief technology officer. We have the university where we are testing the material all the time, where we are also doing new innovation tests with a new kind of plastic materials. And so there's the technological part and the scientific part that makes sure we are meeting those standards. And on the other hand, we have to give the teams on site the right instructions. It's not that we have succeeded from the beginning. You know, it was there's always a learning curve. As I told you, the first container was really not processable. We couldn't use it, you know. But we have met now standards when you take a look at watches, for instance. We have met those standards. A couple of months ago, a Scandinavian company launched the first adult toys made of ocean-bound plastic.
Interesting.
So just imagine what it takes to succeed when it comes to such an intimate object like a sex toy, you know?
Definitely.
So we meet those standards, but I think the secret is that you always have to start with the final product, you know. The classic plastic industry is a linear industry. Everyone within a supply chain does something and then sells it to another company that buys it and does something. And in the end, you have a car, for instance, you know, or something else. You have a chair. Okay. Now, we have a different approach. We ask the brand, what is your purpose? What is your idea? What do you want to produce? We are just now about to finalize a project with a company that produces earphones, you know. So we start with the earphones. What kind of materials are they made of, and what do we have to achieve to make it work? Same with a chair or a shoe. So we always start in talks with the brands we start talking about the final products, and then our scientists go back and see what are the parameters that we have to match to produce this in a quality that raises no question compared to virgin plastic.
Oh, that's awesome. And I love that you touched on that process, because I think that's an important part of the process. I think when you're introducing, in this case, a new material that happens to be an old material, you have that education side of, you know, making sure the end customer is getting the same product that they're expecting. And I think a part of that process is really the education around, you know, hey, we're going to research what's the best material for your headphones.
Yeah.
Here's why it's different. And I would imagine it's a learning experience for the brands too, and they probably gain a new appreciation for kind of the plastic process too.
Absolutely. And you know, a lot of companies are approaching us because they want to become more sustainable, which is really fantastic, of course. And I think basically every company, or a lot of companies, want to become more sustainable because they see the problem and they also want to be part of the solution. But then after these first contacts, you also face skepticism. You're completely right, you know, this was waste. Does it really match the expectations? It's not only I think people who are in a shop, they expect that it meets the expectations. I don't think that they doubt it. But maybe the person who's in charge for the supply chain within a brand, you know, within a company, he's or she's skeptical. Is this was waste? Does it really match our expectations? And we can't afford, of course, losing money or losing reputation. So that's the moment where we really have to prove them why it is possible and how it is possible and that it is possible. And the more products that are being launched now, the better for us, because we can prove with every successful launch, we can prove, hey, no worries, we really match the same quality. If you think about it, it's not that astounding, because if coming back to a PET bottle, this bottle once was approved for food grade. So it was approved to touch our lips, to be connected to our bodies. Basically, this must be a very safe and pure, good material. So if we create something new out of it, we have a fantastic basic material already.
Exactly.
We call it waste, but think about what it was before it was collected. So
yeah, that's a very, very good point. I mean, you're already starting with a really high quality raw material.
Yeah.
That's amazing. And so when it comes to, I mean, the consumer side, I mean, what's the hope for Tide? Is that it becomes kind of known? Because I think in the industry, most of the time, the end product, this is an iPhone, this is a, branded product from a company, but you don't know necessarily the brand of the raw material going into it. Does Tide kind of want to be that brand that's, yes, we use Tide specifically, and it's something that brands can stand by and say, yes, we use this as our recycled plastic material, not just we use recycled plastic.
Yes, exactly. It is our big goal that people talk about. This is made from Tide. Like they say now, this is a Gore-Tex, when it comes to a windproof jacket. Gore-Tex is the material. It's not the brand. The jacket comes from another company, probably a fashion company, but they use Gore-Tex. So we want to become like this self-explaining label for ocean-bound plastic, and we're getting there. That's I'm really hopeful that we're getting there, because more and more brands are contacting us, and they are asking us, can we use the logo, because we want to make sure that people see it's made of Tide. They don't just want to mention this somewhere on a label in a 7-point font. They really want to use our logo to make sure people see that it's made of Tide ocean material and nothing else.
I love that. And one of the interesting materials that I notice you guys offer is 3D printing filament.
Yes.
What has that process kind of been like? And is that kind of like a new frontier in manufacturing? So I haven't jumped into 3D printing that much in any conversations, but obviously it's a way where, traditional manufacturing, you have, molds, and there's usually a little bit of waste with each mold because you're not going to print, a perfect material necessarily for your shape. 3D printing allows for, I think, less waste because you're only printing what is needed, not a lot of waste. How has that kind of been for your business, kind of diving into that arena? Is it just kind of like a exploding world? Is it just kind of something you guys can jump into because you can?
Yes. I mean, we jumped into this business because Professor Schwendemann from the university is also an expert when it comes to filaments. So we have an expertise there, thanks to him and his fantastic team. They really know a lot about 3D printing and filament, and they used our material to create 2 different types of filaments. And then suddenly we realized there's a demand, especially coming from designers, architects, people who are professionally using 3D printing for prototypes, for instance. So for us, I think it's a 3D filament, and also the results, they are an interesting showroom, because Karim Rashid, a fantastic designer based in New York City, he has created a furniture collection, and this furniture collection is 3D printed. So it's like a prototype, and I heard that it goes into series now. Yeah. So for those kind of also well-known designers, this is a fantastic possibility to, print their idea, their vision, without having extreme high tooling costs, for instance, and without having to go into mass production. And then you can also, you have a prototype, you can sell the idea, you can exhibit the idea, for instance, you can touch the idea. So we don't, for our business, it's a side business. But it's very interesting because we get in contact with very interesting people. So Karim is really, they call him the Prince of Plastic. He even builds, in the United States, he even builds hotels, you know, so he's really one of the top designers when it comes to the use of different kind of plastics. And we are flattered that people like him are now using our material also for their collections. Also artists, you know, artists who are doing exhibitions, classic artists, but also it's an interesting scene, but it's not mass production filament. Maybe this will change. I mean, I think 3D printing is still in the beginning, you know.
Oh, definitely. I mean, it's an industry I think it's been around for quite a long time. I think, you know, now that as a consumer you can just go to the store and go buy a 3D printer, I think shows that it's, you know, definitely here to stay. But I think, yeah, in mass manufacturing, it's not a sustainable solution quite yet in terms of for a business to produce something that's 3D printed. It takes more time than doing something a little bit more traditionally. So I think there's some innovation there, but I found it as such an interesting approach to using plastic in terms of 3D printing, because it is less waste in terms of how you actually process it.
Correct.
What's kind of your hope for the future of either manufacturing or just plastic in general? I mean, and more specifically too for Tide. I mean, where are you guys looking to take the business and kind of continue to expand it?
Well, yeah, my hope is that we, as a society, that we really make the shift to use much more recycled materials, not only plastic, by the way. Of course, there's the selfish wish that we that we succeed with Tide. There's also, you know, like another level that we really make the shift as a society and become more sustainable. We all talk about sustainability a lot, but I think we all, including me, can do better when it comes to everyday life, you know.
I think that's what I try and communicate to a lot of people too, is, you know, I think they're under the impression that in order to, you know, live a more conscious life in terms of making decisions like this, you know, that it suddenly has to be this big shift or that it has to be perfect. And it's no, none of us in this entire process is perfect.
Yeah.
The idea is that how can we as a global community all be just a little better? And then if we all become a little better, big things happen. And that's kind of always my belief in it is, yeah, you may have single-use plastic stuff here and there in a certain situation. You know, if you're super thirsty and you have to get a bottle of water, you don't want to put yourself in like a health risk to not consume plastic. But, you know, what do you do the other 364 days a year?
Yeah.
And I think that's where if we can start making those decisions as a society, we can make a bigger impact for sure.
Yes, for sure. And, you know, when we think of drinking bottles, okay, there's also the option to use glass. But what is the impact of glass when it comes to production? You know, what is the carbon footprint of a glass bottle, etc.? So I think I was once invited to a podium discussion, and there was another person, and she was very strict, you know. She was very strict against all plastics. And I understood her, but I told her, I think it's what she's talking about. This is maybe something we can reach in 30 years. But what are we going to do in the next 25 years, you know? Because the problem is here, it's present, it's now. So we have to find a solution. I'm also dreaming of changing the world somehow. But I think Thomas and myself, we are very pragmatic persons. So we understand that if we want to make a change, and if it should be sustainable, then it must be for instance a business. We can't just rely on politics or whatever, you know. It must make sense to everyone. And so far the reactions were really good, I have to say. As I told you, we are also privileged because we were able to start up with Tide, and we are now in our third year and we still exist. So it looks like as if we are here to stay, and that was our hope and goal and vision. And I think in my eyes, the world has produced more than enough plastics. Let's leave the oil where it was and is, and use the plastics we already processed and keep this in circle, and then we're fine.
I love it. I love it. That's a really great approach. And honestly, I mean, in 3 short years, you guys have done some incredible work. It made a huge impact, and obviously impact a lot of people too along the way, which is really
thanks
cool.
a lot.
So, a few other questions that I had. So, one of which is, do you remember your very first consciously sustainable purchase that you made, where you purchased a product because you wanted to make a more conscious decision? Do you remember kind of your first one?
Oh, what was it? I mean, yeah.
Sometimes you go deep into the memory bank for this one.
That was probably when I was 18 and I bought a pair of secondhand skis.
That's so interesting that nobody's answered that before like that. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Secondhand skis. Oh my gosh. That's fascinating. Okay.
Yeah, because those skis were used by someone else for 6 years and I couldn't afford new skis. So I bought these and I drove ski for another 2 or 3 years. And then I was able to buy another pair of new skis.
That's fantastic. That's awesome.
Maybe I already did something when I was a kid, but I don't remember.
I mean, I think it was probably the papers.
Yeah. Yes.
That might be.
Yes, that was a school project, but yes, of course, that was,
Yeah, so not like your choice necessarily, but you were living the lifestyle. So, what is your favorite place to go to enjoy nature? And this is an interesting question for you because you've actually traveled all over the world. Where's your favorite place to enjoy nature?
Oh, that's how do you say a mean question? So you want me to decide? Am I right?
Exactly. It's like choosing your favorite child.
I just come back from a family trip, holiday, summer vacation, and we went to see a volcano in Italy. It's a volcano called Stromboli, and it's an active volcano. So the volcano spits out all 10 minutes. So that was maybe that was the last experience when I felt the strength of nature and how small we are and how much bigger something else is. Because you're in awe. You're standing in front of this volcano. You see the lava and spitting out. My most favorite place in nature. I really love tropical countries. And then I also love the mountains, the Alps. And both are threatened. The mountains, we just had TV reports this week in Switzerland, the glaciers, they are, it's too warm. So, so the ice is melting. So that is as worrying as, the pollution of the oceans.
That's awesome. So, well, not the actual melting. I mean, the actual, place to enjoy nature. I mean, I think there's a humbling part of nature. I think there's a moment, like you mentioned with the volcano, when you're kind of humbled by the power of nature. Yeah. Like, and for me, sometimes it's in the ocean. It's when you realize how powerful waves are,
exactly.
Or how much water is moving actually with a wave.
Exactly. Yeah. Absolutely. No, I really feel, humble is the right word, humble, but also you realize there's something much bigger than we are. The humans have become a selfish society. I think every one of us can do better. I'm including myself, and these experiences, I think, help us to understand why we should do better and protect it, and also maybe just say no to a personal wish sometimes, because we can, protect the environment by less consummation or whatever.
I love that. So how can people get involved with Tide and interact with you guys, reach out to you, work with you guys, order raw material?
Yeah, most of the people are either following us on the social channels or visiting our website. So they can interact on our social channels. That's one way. But we are also very easy accessible via the web or via emails. So we're completely transparent, and you can reach out to us. You find our names. So we are not an anonymous company that is hiding behind a big corporation or whatever. So it's completely transparent.
That's outstanding. Marc, thank you so much for just taking the time to hop on the podcast, talk all about, I mean, everything plastic. I think it is the most in-depth on plastic that I've ever gone in terms of a conversation of really understanding what it looks like globally. And I just think what you guys are working on, Tide, is it's huge. It really is going to change the game. And I think the more manufacturers hop on board, I think the even bigger impact that you guys are going to have as a company too.
Thank you very much, Steve. I'm flattered, and yes, much appreciated that you took us on your show.
Thank you for listening to the Sustainable Goat podcast. I'm your host, Steve Cassingham. With each episode, we can further define what it means to create a truly sustainable and resilient future.
I think the new status is to show that you actually care. You want to drive change and you want to be part of a sustainable future.
People fight for what they love.
Let's really all target for a small but significant shift in the way we live, we consume, and we plan our life.
Join us at sustainablegoat.com.